Got my iPhone and a little small rig monitor set up today as I'm going to do some test shots to see if I can emulate the look of a Sergio Leone film. I don't know about you, but as a filmmaker, I've always been inspired by the way those movies look, and in a way obsessed with the way those movies look. But now with the latest iPhones, with the super telephoto, the 100 and 200 millimeter, I've really been wondering, can we make that look work now? There are several signature styles of Leone movies, of course, but to be clear, I'm talking about his use of close-up shots. And iPhones have had the ability to do telephoto shots for a while, but the 17 Pro series phones really take that further now with the built-in 8x and 4x lenses. And that's a 200 millimeter or 100 millimeter. And one thing to keep in mind is what I'm talking about here with the iPhone and the way Leone shot is apples and oranges. Of course, he shot on film. It was 2x 35 millimeter, and it was spherical, but it was a wider shot. And so while 100 millimeter is 100 millimeter, the field of view is different the way he shot it. And then not to mention the t-stops or the f-stops. On an iPhone, you have a fixed aperture, and it's a really fast aperture. I read where some of those shots from Leone, he would stop down, meaning make a smaller aperture to like a f4 or even a 5.6 or maybe even an 8 occasionally to see more of the world. You wouldn't have so much shallow depth of field. Again, with an iPhone though, you're stuck with the very wide aperture. And so for most telephoto shots, in particular when something's close to the camera, the background's going to be very blurry. Now I'm just doing this test for fun, and I'm not trying to say the iPhone looks like old school 35 millimeter film, not at all. But I have been considering doing a new short film shooting with an iPhone, and so in a way I'm testing out for that, but also again just to have some fun. So first up, we'll use the 100 millimeter or the 4x tele built into the 17 Pro Max I'm using. So these are some of the classic shots that people think of, and I'm guessing here, but this is probably about 100 millimeter, maybe an 85, could be a 75, depends. The background's pretty shallow, and his face still has character because longer lenses tend to compress the image more and flatten out faces. But here, I think it's in that range. And so here is me 10 feet away with the 100 millimeter. And by the way, filming yourself with a long lens is not easy. That's why I've got that small rig monitor on top of the camera. And while of course the shot's not the same, I think the characteristic of the lens looks pretty similar. But moving a little bit closer, I'm now 6 feet away here, might actually sell it a little bit more. Now we'll try the 200 millimeter or the 8x, again built into the 17 Pro Max. And here I'm 15 feet away, and you can see how the shot is more compressed and my face is kind of flattening out. Wider lenses make your face look narrower, and longer lenses tend to make it look wider. So the 200 millimeter is similar again to Eastwood here and Charles Bronson. But if you look at the depth of field behind Clint Eastwood from The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, you can kind of make out what's behind him. With Charles Bronson here, the background's totally blurred. They have a wider aperture going for sure, and maybe just a longer lens. So now here's the 200 millimeter on me, and now I'm 8 feet away. So when you get closer, the shape of your face changes in the lens. And this looks probably a little bit more like the shots from the movies. And then of course there's the classic extreme close-ups from The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, probably in the 85 to 200 millimeter range, depending on how far away they are. Backgrounds obviously very out of focus. The faces have nice characteristics to them, so they don't look too flat. So here with me now with a 200 millimeter lens, and I'm 4 feet away from the camera. And so this is a similar feel to those shots. Again, I'm using the built-in lenses on the iPhone. We never had this type of focal range before until the 17 Pro series. And then the even tighter shot here with Clint Eastwood. And so then I pushed in further in post-production, just zoomed in a little bit. Same shot, 200 millimeter, 4 feet away. And now you're getting a pretty similar look to that shot. And I've mentioned being close several times, and here's a behind-the-scenes shot of Leone lining up a shot. And so the shot he's shooting could look like this one here from Henry Fonda. This isn't the same shot because this is an interior one. Or it could be something like this. Now this is not a side angle, but when you get closer with a wider lens, you get these what I call wide close-ups. And these are actually some of my very favorite shots that Leone does. I'm not exactly sure what lens they're using here. If I had to guess, it would be between a 35 to a 40 millimeter. Again, the field of view is going to differ. And so on an iPhone, I've got a 48 millimeter, and that's what we're going to try next. So with the 48 millimeter, I am now 3.5 feet away. It's still a nice tight close-up, but you can see how it's more of a, not a wide angle look, but a wider look. This shot here of the cowboy is probably even wider. I know Leone used a lot of zoom lenses, like an Angino that was maybe a 25 to 200. So he had a wide range to choose from, and this is obviously on the wider end of it. But I bet the camera is just a couple feet away from this actor. Now here's the same 48 millimeter on the iPhone, and I'm only a foot away from the camera. And you're really starting to see how that wide close-up can look. One thing to keep in mind though is I am letterboxing here 16:9 footage. I didn't shoot open gate. But another way to go with an iPhone, of course, is to use an external lens. And so here I'm using the ReeFlex 2x telephoto on the iPhone 24mm. And so essentially I'm getting a 48mm again, like the built-in virtual camera, but here I'm using an external lens to achieve that. And so this first shot, I'm 2 feet away from the camera. And again, it's the 24mm with the 2x tele. And I think this looks, again, pretty similar to what they did in the movie. And even close to this famous shot where the guy's breaking the fourth wall. That's a wider lens though, but you can see the background more. The t-stop is probably 5.6. And so here now with the ReeFlex lens, I'm only 8 inches away from the camera. Now the focus is a little bit touchy here. Some of my face is in focus and some's a little bit out of focus. But again, I'm very close to the camera, attempting to emulate that previous shot. But the one thing you'll notice here, again, because I had to letterbox this 16:9 footage. So let's push in on this guy to make it 16:9. And now I'll take the letterbox away on my face. And now you're starting to see a much more similar looking shot. The Leone shot's wider, but you can see that you can achieve that similar result here with this setup. And again, it's hard for me to know exactly, but Leone would routinely get very close to the actors' faces to pull off these shots. And I've always been a fan of that look. So yeah, you can get a similar look now using an iPhone. And again, just as a reminder, just because you're using a telephoto doesn't mean you put the camera far away. When you shoot closer and tighter, you can get some really interesting looks. But in the end, you just want to do what works best for your story. And if you've seen my short films and even my feature films, you know that I've used some shots like this in my own projects.
You understand the deal, right?
They have a mind of their own, but I'm sure it'll work itself out.
But it's not just the tight shots. This famous wide shot with the cool blocking from Once Upon a Time in the West was definitely an inspiration for a scene in my most recent movie, Casey Makes a Mixtape. Not exactly a spaghetti western, but that doesn't matter. Wherever you get inspiration and whatever works for your movie can be great. And by the way, this movie is streaming right now on Amazon, Apple TV, and many more. Definitely check it out if you haven't. I'll put a link for that in the description, and along with the other gear I used in this video. So as I often say, it's a great time to be a filmmaker, so whatever you're shooting, and whatever brings you inspiration, don't wait to create. Get out there and make your movie. Thanks for watching. This is Blake Calhoun. Please like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.